Today we're jumping into the incredible story of the Aztec Empire. I mean, think about it. A civilization born from a divine prophecy, built with mind-blowing skill right on top of the water, and then, boom, a brutal, super-fast collapse. It's a wild story of gods, gold, and a city that honestly sounds like something out of a dream.
So everything kicks off with this really powerful prophecy. This was the command given to a wandering tribe, the Mexica, from their main god, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. And this one single vision, it set them off on this epic journey that lasted for generations, all to find their home and build their destiny.
All right, let's get into the first part of our story. How this nomadic tribe followed a divine sign to build their home in, well, one of the most difficult places you could possibly imagine.
So the Mexica wandered for what must have felt like forever. And then, finally, in 1325, they see it, the exact sign their god told them to look for, smack dab in the middle of a huge lake. But here's the catch. Their promised land wasn't land at all. It was just a marshy, swampy island. You know, for most people, that would have been a deal breaker. But for the Mexica? Oh no, this was just the beginning.
And this was their brilliant solution, the Chinampa. People call them floating gardens, but that really doesn't do them justice. These were amazing feats of engineering. I mean, they wove these huge reed mats, stuck them to the lake bed, and then piled on mud and soil. And what they got was this super fertile, self-watering farmland. They weren't just surviving on the water, they were literally building their future from it.
Now, this whole idea wasn't just for growing food. It was the foundation for one of the most spectacular cities on the entire planet at the time. What they built next wasn't just a place to live. It was an engineering marvel that would leave anyone who saw it completely speechless.
Can you just imagine being Hernán Cortés, the Spanish conquistador, in 1519? You're marching through the jungle, and then suddenly you see this. And remember, this quote isn't from some poet. This is the totally stunned reaction of a tough, battle-hardened soldier. The city, Tenochtitlan, must have looked like something straight out of a fantasy story.
And it was huge. I mean, to put this in perspective, Tenochtitlan had over 200,000 people. That made it bigger than London, bigger than Paris, bigger than pretty much any European capital at the time. This wasn't some little outpost. It was a true global metropolis.
And the city itself was just, wow, so advanced. They had this grid of canals that were basically water streets, so everyone got around by boat. 4 giant causeways linked the island to the mainland, and these things were huge, wide enough for 10 horses to ride across at once. Right in the middle of it all was the Templo Mayor, this colossal pyramid just shooting up into the sky. They even built 2 aqueducts to bring fresh water in from the mountains. This was a seriously organized, thriving city.
But how did an empire this magnificent keep going? Well, behind all that beautiful architecture was a system built on pure military power and a very dark, very serious pact they had with their gods.
You see, the Aztec Empire wasn't a single unified country like we might think. It was more like a massive network based on tribute. They'd go out, conquer their neighbors, and instead of ruling them directly, they'd just demand payments. Grain, gold, cloth, but the most precious tribute of all, that was people.
Society was super rigid. At the very top, you had the king, the Tlatoani, who was seen as a living representative of the gods. Right below him were the elite warriors and priests. And yeah, there was a huge class of farmers and slaves at the bottom. But the Aztecs also had complex laws and even required school for all children, which was pretty advanced for its time.
We talked about how the most valuable tribute was people. But why? Why would you demand human lives? The answer to that gets us to the dark, beating heart of the Aztec religion, and it reveals the most infamous part of their entire civilization.
Okay, this is really important to get. This wasn't just random, mindless violence. For them, it was a fundamental religious belief. The Aztecs believed their sun god, Huitzilopochtli, was in this constant, epic battle against darkness. And to have the strength to win that fight and rise every single morning, he needed fuel. And that fuel was human blood and hearts. So in their eyes, this wasn't murder. It was a sacred duty. They believed they were literally keeping the world from ending.
The sheer scale of this is just hard to wrap your head around.
When they rededicated the Templo Mayor in 1487, it's estimated that over 80,000 people, mostly prisoners of war, were sacrificed in just 4 days. This constant need for victims is what drove their wars and, unsurprisingly, created a lot of hatred among their neighbors.
And all that resentment, it would become their biggest weakness. So now we're at the final dramatic chapter, the fall of the empire, which, believe it or not, happened with shocking speed. So in 1519, Hernán Cortés shows up in Mexico with only about 500 soldiers and 16 horses. He very quickly figured out that a lot of the local tribes, like the Tlaxcalans, absolutely hated the Aztecs. So he made some powerful friends. By 1521, after a horrible siege and a deadly smallpox epidemic brought over by the Europeans, the great city of Tenochtitlan was completely destroyed.
And it's so important to realize this. The empire didn't fall to just 500 guys. It fell to a perfect storm. You had the Spanish with their steel and horses, sure. You had a horrific smallpox epidemic that the Aztecs had zero immunity to, but the real game changer? The thousands upon thousands of local warriors from other tribes who couldn't wait to join the Spanish to finally get rid of the Aztecs.
So the empire was gone, but its legacy wasn't totally wiped out. In fact, it was buried, quite literally, right under the foundation of a whole new world.
After they conquered the city, the Spanish just started taking apart the pyramids and temples of Tenochtitlan. They used the very same stones to build their own cathedrals and government buildings, creating Mexico City right on top of the rubble of the Aztec capital.
And that's a really powerful idea to leave you with. The heart of the Aztec Empire is still there, just under the surface. The main square of one of the biggest modern cities in the world sits directly on top of the sacred center of Tenochtitlan. History is literally right under your feet.
So that leaves us with this big question, right? How should we remember the Aztecs? Are they the brilliant engineers and astronomers who built an